Oh, just a little skin thing, general risk management and maintenance. Got a little growth removed off there. So things always take longer than you think to get done. So looks like we're just getting some people streaming in here. I know one thing I wanted to chat with you about today. So kind of been following this one guy on Twitter that is a logistical guy, right?
Yeah.
If you followed him, or I think you're following him too, and he may be Project 44 or another one, but there's a lot of funky stuff happening in trucking right now, like a fear of overcapacity and a lot more people that kind of piled in and started doing trucking. And I guess does that make sense or not?
Speculation, I guess, is the only thing I can say.
Well,
because
I think
the threshold to enter that market is very low. Okay, I mean, you got everybody you got a heartbeat that'll loan you money on a truck, but the question is can you make it a viable revenue producing asset, and for how long?
Well, that was the stream I was reading. Was a lot of people are coming in that have never run a business before, so right away, it's almost $1 a mile just in fuel. Right?
Oh, I mean, your break-even cost right now are probably $1.35 to $1.45 a mile, depending on where.
Yeah, I'm just talking just for the fuel, right?
Yeah.
And then you got to add all. So people that are getting into trucking now, they're not used to running a business or keeping a P&L. I think his message was, you just got to make sure you know what you're doing, right? Because you could all of a sudden be doing hauls you're making money on, you're losing money, right?
Oh, in a heartbeat. But I think that's with anything right now, because nobody really knows what anything's worth. But I guess, to kind of piggyback on that, right now I wouldn't be too terribly worried about it, even with diesel prices as high as they are. I mean, once again, you had a guy, if we have contract guys that run 200 miles or less for us in the Carolinas and Georgia, and I mean, they're getting $800 for 0 to 150 miles. So, I mean, if you can't make money doing that, you may as well sit at the house and play Tetris or something. But, it's the guys that try to go hit these big steel hauls coming out of your steel plants and go cross country. And they're starting to deal with different jurisdictions, fuel taxes, insurance costs to expand that radius. And that's where the punch in the gut is.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, look, everybody, welcome to Cutting Edge. Charles De La Torre, Ashley Buckle Materials Exchange, mxlumber.com, where we talk every Monday. We kind of started talking about the Southeast lumber market, but gosh, the more we talk, the more this market expands everywhere else for odd reasons, right? So, what we talked about last week, Charles, weren't sure what was going on. A lot of people were leaning to the negative side because maybe everything else going on in the world. But there's a lot of good stuff in construction going on too, a lot more than we think. I mean, and markets always climb the wall of worry, right? So I think the way we summed it up last week was spruce was just where it was. It was staying where it was to resilient because of the logistical issues. People still had cars 4 or 5 weeks late out of Canada, and they were working on getting that done. I had a buddy call after we had our call. She said, "Hey, look, I've had two camps call me. One that says that rail's never going to get better out of Canada, and one that said that it's already better." Right? So I don't know where the truth is. Somewhere in the middle, right?
Three sides.
Yeah. So, but one thing was for certain, especially toward the end of the week. And I think we've been having this feeling, and I could see it building on our exchange where I could see people that were bidding to multifamily jobs, right? And all of a sudden, kind of busted loose middle of the week. There's a lot of jobs, and this is a world you live in more. There's a lot of multifamily stuff trying to button stuff up, close stuff up, book stuff, get stuff done, and we really saw that push through on a little bit of Southern Pine stuff, and especially panels and especially OSB going into Friday. I mean, there's no doubt that turned from some interest a week ago to buying early last week to pretty good buying. But my gosh, George just sent something out about how good multifamily was last year and this year, and there's no doubt that may pull the freaking ox cart for us this year for home building, right? Or really lead the charge.
No, it definitely will. I think, I heard somebody say something about interest rates, and I don't know really. I feel like it's a pretty intuitive, smart statement. But I mean, you start talking about single family and 5% mortgages, right? But if your house raises in value 5% every year, it's a wash, right? So it's a net zero.
Right.
But the one thing that we're not taking into consideration on that side is that multifamily is going to continue to boom when you have people that can afford a rent or a lease over a mortgage and lawn care and lawn mowers and pool care and all these other things. So that's why I think multifamily is going to have a big charge. Not to mention, you got a lot of city dwellers that are leaving these metros and they're wanting something similar to what they're used to, but not the same.
Well, Charles, great point for a couple reasons there. One, if it's a multifamily place that they're buying, they don't want to take care of stuff because if they want to do their job in their airstream, they want to be able to leave when they can or do something, right? Or from a rental standpoint, some people don't want to be tied down to a certain city for too long if they get a better deal somewhere else, right? So that all leads into a positive for multifamily. But for what we're seeing it, and if I go back to your thing, I just see a lot of people don't want to mow lawns and do snow, and I don't want to do that. I go out in my garage to move my 2 snow blowers out to get back to lawn equipment to plant stuff. I'm like, ugh, right? And like, it's fun up to a point, right?
Oh, I mean, I agree with you.
Although I don't have a D6 dozer like you do doing lawn work. Pretty incredible.
Well, that's not for lawn work, but it's a rental, man. I'm
impressed, man.
I'm trying to build some quail woods, but no, it's interesting. I mean, and as far as the multifamily, once again, to touch on it again, is single family rental and how much private equity money is going into that space. So you're going to have another high density use coming pretty quickly down the pipe. Because all those floor plans are the same. I mean, they would buy on the same premise that a multifamily would. Windows and doors are all in the same places.
Jerry Voss was asking, but will housing get 5% year over year? To Ash's point a few weeks back, how long will that be true? That's true. I mean, in my opinion, I think so let me just speak about the area I'm at in Chicago, right? We're all excited that home prices are back up here. You know what? They're back to where I bought my house in 2004, right? So, but then you get to other areas of the country, Florida, the Vegas, Austin, Texas, where they've experienced unbelievable growth. Seattle, Portland, for what I personally think that this 5% year over year is going to be tough to keep up, but I don't know, right? I'm also amazed at what I've seen over the past year, right? Just the year over year. Especially in places like Florida, where you live, Charles. Just look at the crazy prices on stuff there, right?
Oh, I mean, in metros, Greenville and Charleston, and I mean, we're an hour and a half south of Charlotte, and South Charlotte's extended into Indian Land, South Carolina, and Rock Hill pretty heavy.
Right.
I mean, those real estate values are I mean, sky high.
Yeah. Well, like Warren Buffett said at his meeting, he'd rather buy farmland than buy Bitcoin, right?
Because wouldn't buy it for $25. What's the quote?
So one thing you talked about a month ago. You literally talked about this a month ago, and you pushed it on this show for 4 weeks. Southern yellow pine studs versus spruce studs, right? And something had to give there. Well, last week we had people calling that were watching the show and bidding on. They want southern yellow pine studs up in Wisconsin and Illinois now. 2x4, 2x6 9s, because they heard what you were saying and like, yeah, at that number, we can do that, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, because 2x6, 9-foot and 10-foot has been stuck in such a elevated trading range that it would behoove anybody to take advantage of that because it benefits their bottom line long term.
Yeah, and don't hold me to these numbers, but 2x6, 104 5/8, number 2 spruce delivered to most places is probably still $1,500, $1,000.
You're pretty accurate on that.
It probably and 2x4 is probably I've seen low trades at 1,100, 1,200. Maybe it got a little lower than that, but something's got to give a little bit. But anyway, it was good feedback because pine is a great product. It's really improved over the last, a lot of people have memories from 30 years ago, right? And fact is, this pine stuff looks really good.
One of the cause and effects of the plantation style planting that we do in the Southeast and how we commercially harvest now, everybody says something about the growth rings. I actually saw it this morning compared to old growth pine timber that was cut, 100 years ago or 50 years ago or 70 years ago. A lot of the problem with that is that wood carried so much sap and pine tar that it would mold so much faster. Whereas the pine product that people are putting out now, the longevity of it and the ability to bear bad weather is probably improved 30 to 40% compared to 30 years ago. So that's a big thing too. And we've had a lot of customers request paper wrap, which we can do. So, I mean, I think it's going to have a stronghold moving forward as long as there's opportunity on the price standpoint.
Yeah, I don't think people understand sometimes this plantation, and they do it in the Pacific Northwest and other places, and especially sometimes if you go to Brazil in the pulp areas, you see hundreds of acres of these plantation pines, and they have the same knots and branches because they're genetically, basically, they're genetically produced to withstand certain things, and it's a really nice piece of fiber, right? I mean, think about it.
Definitely.
Timber now in the South it's like a long-term agricultural crop. Right. And It's done so well down there. Are there still places where a lot of timber's harvested out of, non-traditional or not the old traditional way? Heck yeah, there's still quite a bit of that. Right. Especially when you get in the bigger logs right down in the South and the Central. Right. That's still old school.
Yeah.
Method, right?
Old growth is few and far between. And I mean, even some of your majors won't take a butt size that exceeds 22 to 24 inches, where some of that old growth is a lot bigger than that.
Right. So before we brought everybody into the show, you and I were talking a little bit, well, they may have about trucking. So are we, and I actually saw on Twitter this week, everybody's talking about how there was no containers coming in, but it sounds like there are containers coming into ports now. And a lot of that that is working. Will that change? I don't know, but trucking seems to have opened up a little bit more and certain lanes are continuing to open. Is that because of a slowdown in certain things? You saw where Amazon saw some stuff slowing down because, hey, when people are worried about money, they buy less stuff, right? When they buy less stuff is shipped. So that actually is a benefit for our industry because we need more stuff shipped in a prompt manner as quick as we can. So we could probably gobble up a lot of that capacity pretty darn quick, right?
Oh, almost immediately, I'd venture to guess.
Yeah. Are you still seeing hard moves from the South back north? That seemed to be
but coming back to the South historically has been a lot easier. But I mean, South Carolina as a whole has been rough over the past 30 to 45 days. I mean, even going to Georgia, Florida, and North Carolina. I mean, every state that touches us pretty much.
Yeah.
It's been excessive as far as costs go. But I mean, at the same time, it's a game you play, right?
How far out are you on how far of an order file do you have now on your stud packages that you're cutting for multifamily and for others?
First week of June.
First week of June. Wow. Is that the farthest you've ever been out in an order file before? Or?
No, we've been out 8 weeks.
Okay.
And I mean, we're waiting on some other stuff to come through, but I mean, I'd imagine by the end of the week, we'll probably be 6 weeks out.
Okay. All right. Real good. Let's talk a little bit and kind of button this up, bring it home on talking about spruce continues to stay relatively stable to some things, 2x4, 16s, different items people are still looking for and buying. Southern pine, it seems to be trying to find, it's like the stock market is trying to find a bottom in here. And I think it had a little hard time off that bite that happened 2 weeks ago. What's your feeling on the pine market?
There's certain items that got down and dirty pretty quick after, a week and a half ago, and buildups were destroyed and decimated, and now all of a sudden everybody can bump pricing. And you and I have discussed it in the past. I think, $30, $40, $50, $60 price moves based on what is considered a buildup and who has it and how quickly they liquidate it is going to be a direct reflection of what the market does, because they're no longer in a position where they have to do anything.
Right.
And that's more powerful now than it has been in history because they understand that people are willing to pay for it. Honestly.
Sure. So as far as the pine stuff, you get a lot of good feedback. Have any of the treaters, from what I hear, and I'm not a treater, nor do I pretend to be one, have definitely slowed down?
Yes.
relative to the pace that they were at last year, right? At this time.
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, DIY is their biggest consumer. And I mean, if you walk in any Lowe's, Home Depot, I mean, they got plenty of wood.
Yeah.
So, and I think you and Greg and Matt talked about the fall off of DIY last week.
Yeah, it's from the people that we know in the certain species and grades that we deal with, and also just listen to people and looking on social media. I just see a lot more prime grades showing up, specialty grades showing up that used to be probably cut. I mean, let's face it, if somebody has to do something and bury the wood that they were selling to the home centers, it's going to show up somewhere, and it always does. But the positive thing I'm seeing is there's active bids out there for it, right? Like I've lived through markets before in my life where there's no bid, and that's not fun at all, right? Especially if you own stuff.
Yes, it's scary actually.
Yeah. Like somebody said the other day, how do you report? What's a good price in this market? In this market, it was a down market, and he's like, whatever you can get a firm order at to move it, right? And that's a good price. I don't think we're in that kind of market. I think you're kind of in a market where, at least in the pine market, where mills are willing to a certain extent to work with people, but like you said, they're not in any position they have to do anything, right?
No, I mean they were a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and a lot of that stuff just disappeared.
Right. So what's your thoughts going into this? What's your thoughts going into this week? What are we looking for? Do you think by Friday we're going to have a firmed up pine market, or what's your thought there? And OSB, we didn't talk about that. That market was in a free fall for a while, right?
Well,
I think it stopped going down and kind of caught a bite. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, they got a foothold for sure, but I mean, it had to come off $400 or $500 in 6 days for that to happen.
Yes.
And you know, earlier you mentioned the consumption of panels or the demand of panels for multifamily. Well, yeah, I mean, you go from quoting a job at $1,200 and all of a sudden you can buy it at $700. Yeah,
you're on
all my chips on black for that.
Yeah. There's no doubt there. So, what do you think? What's your thoughts going into the rest of the week?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's too early to tell. I think people are a little lethargic on Mondays nowadays because they're so worn out from everything that happens in the previous week. From the conversations I've had, there's some pine that is moving swiftly through the supply chain. And when that happens and it all goes away, there goes your opportunity to buy, and then it firms up because once again, they go back to a 2 or 3 week order file, which is historically standing. Southern pine mills keep that, right? That's where they want to stay. Now, obviously, they did a heck of a job selling into it through this historic high. But that 2 to 3 week lead time is where they want to live, and if they can firm up pricing based on that, why wouldn't they?
Well, one thing we saw too, and one of our sellers educated me a little bit on this. There was some people up in Indiana and Michigan that traditionally use spruce for building metal ag buildings and other things. And they're like, you know what? We'll try some 2x4 number 2 prime, and we'll try some 2x4 number 1 if it's no prior select out of a mill. And so we're shipping pine now. I mean, I'm serious when I say it's not just studs. When you get this big of divergence in price, it's going up north, right?
Oh yeah,
and
definitely.
I'm kind of excited about it because we've got a lot of people like selling pine on the MX platform and, support us. And there is more of an abundance of people willing to sell pine than I see. Spruce is getting a lot harder. Mills are getting bigger, and it's not as I guess what I'm saying is I think pine is going to make a bigger move up to the north than what people think. I think it already is.
I think it has, and I think it's going to stay there, especially with the consolidation of your majors.
And that'll take that big bid-ask spread between spruce and pine out of the market, which you're probably already seeing, right?
A little bit.
All right, well, cool. Again, Charles from Industrial Forest Products. You can reach Charles if we can throw his email up there. Thanks, C. De La Torre at ifpwood.com. Charles has a lot of solutions for multi-family people and industrial people. And he's a good guy to get a hold of with his team. How's your new line? Is that all in and going now?
We are almost done. Almost
right
done.
On.
We got riggers coming and electricians coming Wednesday to finish it. So that's a positive.
Somebody
Super pumped about that, actually.
Yeah, and if you want to come to mxlumber.com, that's mxlumber.com. Register with us. It says get started, and we'll get you on the platform buying and selling lumber. quickly. There's no hassle getting on. There's no cost getting on. We want you on and look at the transparency in the market. Jared, I got this question, the same one Jared Voss asked here, and I'm not real good at answering this. Any thoughts on LVL availability improving? I think, Jared, one thing I can answer you to that is almost every call we have now, or every show that we have, somebody asks me that question, which obviously, because so many people are asking me that, it's obviously an issue somewhere. How will that get resolved? I think it'll be resolved by more people engineering wide, solid timbers or lumber into their products, or somehow more production coming on in LVLs. And there's not a lot of producers of it, so I don't have a good answer to that. What about you, Charles?
I think it's going to be difficult because historically, plywood mills that are peeling logs, they'd sell their veneer on the secondary market because they're finished good pricing, right? I mean, if you have $1,000 or $900 half-inch 4-ply, there's not a huge benefit to allocate more veneer to go into an engineered product. So I think it's going to be a little bit further down the road before we see that easing up.
Yeah, I agree. I need to do a better job. Maybe what we could do is get somebody on these shows one day that actually is a little smarter than I am on LVL, which means they wouldn't have to know very much.
Me too. I just know they use veneers and glue. That's about all.
Maybe I can ask the question back to Jared. What is the pain point you're seeing, and how long is a typical LVL order coming in relative to what your expectations are, right? Because if I can have a better base to answer that question, I'd sure love to answer it. The world I live in, I've done some of it when I've been building before, but I never had a problem getting it when I got it. But it seems to be that seems to be a pain point over the last 2 years. Well, anyway,
I-joist in that mix too.
Yeah, I-joist in that mix. So let's talk real quick. So for a while there, plywood, we moved a lot of Brazilian plywood on the platform last week, a good chunk of it, both in square edge product, 15, 30 seconds, 23, 30 seconds TNG. That was a big mover, especially when plywood went a discount to OSB. OSB kind of caught up, then bounced. Is that play out, or are there still people actively pursuing, looking for the export and solid and North American production plywood?
Depends on the item. I mean, if you're looking at 5/8, yeah, there's opportunity. If you're looking at three-quarter ULT and G is kind of out compared to OSB. But 5/8 is probably the biggest kind of trade against itself available in that panel market. Because I mean, half-inch is half-inch, and 7/16 is relatively inexpensive, right?
Yeah.
Compared to where it was 2 weeks ago. So, OSB is obviously preferred. It's easier to handle. It's lighter, yada, 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 so on and so forth. So when you start getting into a 7/16, which is the most widely used panel, 15, 30 seconds is going to kind of take a back seat. But one thing that we always do is we try to make sure that we arbitrage the two, no matter what the thickness is, to bring the best value for our customer on the bottom line.
No, one thing we don't touch on here, and you probably deal a lot more. What's the industrial market doing right now? What is the non-traditional, not a single family, multifamily builder? You also deal with a lot of industrial companies where you're doing stuff for packaging, for crating, for all kinds of. How's that market been? Has that continued to grow? Is it? I mean, we don't really touch base with that very much.
Well, the industrial market is kind of a beast in and of itself, because it's such a tiered market. You have guys that use green pine, KD pine, and some of them use either one of these exclusively, and then you have guys that use hardwood. Well, the hardwood market's absolutely on fire due to the fact that it takes 40 years to grow North American hardwood, right? Number one. Number two, you spoke earlier about timber being a long-term agricultural crop for the Southeast. Well, you can get saw timber out of pine a heck of a lot faster than you can out of red oak or white oak, right?
For sure. Yeah.
So the hardwood market is kind of one of its own. And then you've got opportunities for timbers and selling pallet components and runners and all kinds of stuff. So I mean, that market right now, we're seeing a lot of independent need and some transition to finished product versus a raw material. And what I mean by that is instead of somebody buying a 3.5 by 6 hardwood can or a pine timber, they're actually buying a finished good, whether it's an 1 1/8 runner or a 5/8 inch board or a 1/2 inch board, because they can't get anybody to work. And if they go from, a lot of these bigger pallet manufacturers ran quasi high-end processing in their facility, all the way from a timber to a finished good to a dry kiln, right? Because they were buying a downfall product from a mill specifically. But now, because they don't have the people to work that front end as far as the processing, it's a lot easier to allocate that labor to the finished good, whether it's running an automatic pallet line or finished components or what have you. So there's been a little bit of a shift to more, instead of those guys being real budget conscious, they want to be able to deliver. It's no different than what we do in the structural game. So it's one and the same. It's just different animals and it's different protocol.
Do you make those? Do you produce those pellet parts down there at all?
We trim and reman green pine timbers into those items, yeah. And then we also have the ability to we buy some hardwood timbers and sell them to steel plants too for dunnage.
Right on, right on. All right, Charles, we're up against half an hour. I know you're busy. I appreciate you coming on. Everybody, make sure that you look Charles up if you need anything on the multifamily industrial side, and come to mxlumber.com, sign up. And
hey, Ash, it sounds like we need to connect on those guys in Indiana and Ohio, though.
Yeah, for sure, because he sent me over. They sent us over a list of what they're looking for, and they're far down the chain, right? So they're used to going through a different. So they gave me a list of what they want to buy, and I'm trying to show them how to bid on it. But yeah, we'll talk offline about this and get that taken care of.
Sounds good. I appreciate it.
Have a good day.
All right.